Alignment creates peace. What is the purpose of peace, or where does peace come from? Peace comes when you are fulfilled and you are content. And when you are content and fulfilled, certain things are met. Your needs are met. Your family's needs are met, right? And so the first thing I'm going to ask about is the goal, but it's not the goal you're thinking of. It's how are you doing? It's a very simple question that could have a myriad of answers, but the answer you're probably going to get if you do this consistently, if you do these one on ones consistently and you are truly invested in your people, the answer that you're going to get changes every single time.
Great experiences build great leaders. Great leaders build great teams. This is Building Great Sales Teams.
All right, guys, welcome back to Building Great Sales Teams. First off, I don't know that it's necessarily an apology per se, but I do want to explain myself. After 300 and some odd episodes, I had 3 to 4 weeks in a row where I did not have an episode. I think it was roughly 3 weeks. This one will be coming out the fourth week to end the streak of not having any new episodes. I love the episode I ended on, though, which was the KPI Trinity. This was a fantastic episode, inspired by a talk I was going to do with the win rate community. And if you guys don't know, I've been coaching for win rate for a couple months now. The first week that I didn't have an episode come out was a week after my vacation with my wife on a Royal Caribbean cruise, which was a fantastic time. We had an amazing trip and really, really got to work on our relationship. It was great. The next week, I went out to South Carolina, to Greenville, to meet with the win rate community and have that talk I told you guys about. And the following week was spent catching up for the last 2 weeks, making sure clients' deliverables were turned in, and making sure that my other business, Podcast Partners, was taken care of. Catching up with my team, and like we all do in business, just making sure that the checks are coming in, right? And so I want to get back on the wagon. You know what I mean? 3 weeks off was weird. It was weird seeing the same episode up there. And then my team was coming out with some new content, which was awesome, but it was from old episodes. And so, in true fashion, in my solo episode fashion, we're gonna talk about a very tactical subject. Okay. And what I love about this subject is I get these questions a lot around. I just remembered I saw someone's post. Who was it? I'm gonna call him out. Who was it? It was damn, I forgot. Okay. But one of my friends' posts was, if an influencer, or if a quote unquote guru or somebody says, I get this question a lot, then they most certainly don't get that question. Which is true most of the time. Someone asked me the other day, you see posts start like that all the time, and it's funny, but straight up, you guys understand when you hear the question why I get it a lot. It is usually something around a salesperson, a difficult salesperson or manager, and the question is usually centered around, why can't they do this like I did it? I know it can be done because I did it before. Why can't they just do it like I did, right? And so I often find the philosophy is a little broken behind this question, right? You think that just because you have pioneered, or you have accomplished these sales targets or these sales goals, that everybody else should follow you in doing that, you know? And one thing I want to point out, and I talk about this a lot, you are in the position you are in because you are who you are, right? You are in the position you are in because you are who you are. And that's not fair to compare yourself to everybody else, whether good or bad. And so, if we want a certain result, then we need to document the formula for that result, right? And so, this brings me to the subject of this podcast, which I am more than sure I've covered on other podcasts, but at the end of the day, the same things ring true. And that is a one-on-one is a huge part of managing your sales team and your sales management. It's not exclusive to one or the other. No one in a sales team should ever be neglected. So if you do a one-on-one for your sales reps, which your managers should be doing with them, then you need to be doing a one-on-one with your managers. And depending on how big your company is, maybe your coach is doing one-on-ones with you. And or maybe your board is doing one-on-ones with you every quarter, every month, whatever the case is, right? I'm always going to recommend monthly at minimum, bi-weekly at maximum likely. As far as the managers to reps, they should already be having a sales meeting every week. Okay, so let's talk about the one-on-one. I want you to look at it as a mountain that you're going to reverse engineer. Okay. This is every one-on-one conversation. Now, you're in sales, around sales, you're a business owner. So I hope you're a creative thinker in that even though you have the same structure, you don't have the same content in every conversation, right? And so typically I like to start my one-on-ones with the goal. And the goal is not their dollar goal or, these big purchases they want to make. The goal is alignment, right? The goal is peace. Alignment creates peace, which what is the purpose of peace or where does peace come from? Peace comes when you are fulfilled and you are content. And when you are content and fulfilled, certain things are met. Your needs are met. Your family's needs are met, right? And so the first thing I'm going to ask about is the goal, but it's not the goal you're thinking of. It's how are you doing? It's a very simple question that could have a myriad of answers, but the answer you're probably going to get if you do this consistently, if you do these one on ones consistently and you are truly invested in your people, the answer that you're going to get changes every single time. Now, I don't mean the surface level answer. I'm good. No, not that one. I understand you're good, but how are you doing? I understand in the relation to the job, to life in general, you have a roof over your head, you have food in your belly, you have, everything that you need to be taken care of, but how are you doing? And so the answer to this typically takes us down the path that we have to reverse engineer to get to the top of the mountain, which to me, I can't get around it. It's peace, it's fulfillment, it's contentment, right? Um, it typically leads that, well, I'm having a rough time. My wife is upset because I work too much, The beautiful thing about this is even if they're trying to rope you into a conversation of getting paid more or working less or whatever the case may be, the beautiful thing behind this is you have documented the success formula correctly, then it all leads back to that. And I'll show you what I mean. So if a rep comes in the office and he says, "Hey, my wife is upset because I work too much. My hours are too long," whatever the case is, right? Then you ask him, "Okay, what is your goal?" Okay, we're going back to the goal. There's the peace and alignment and contentment, right? That's the ultimate goal. But part of this person having peace is his wife to be happy with the time that he spends with his family and her, right? And so, the first thing I want to look at is do you have a position that is realistic in terms of hours? If you don't, we're kind of wasting our time with this conversation. If you have to work 60 hours a week to make 100 grand a year, you need to adjust that position. You need to figure it out. You need to sell a higher ticket product, or you need to sell more volume. You need to have a higher prospecting activity on the formula side. You need to invest more in referral partners so you get better leads that end up in better commissions, right? There's something in that formula that's off. Your team should not have to work 60 hours a week to make 100 grand a year. Okay. Now, most of the positions and the way that we set them up, they're going to accommodate that six-figure income. Okay. The way that I have preached on this podcast over and over again is to set it up in such a way that for a reasonable amount of activity, they can make a six-figure income. Okay. And so if that's not the case, then you need to go to work on that. Right. If you're getting this back from your team, if you're having people turn over because they're saying they're working too much or whatever the case is, and you know that to be true, you know it takes 60 hours to make 100 grand, then you've got a problem in your formula. Your formula is the minimum standards and the scope of work required to get to a certain income, right? And so let's go into the plan, right? The goal is to work less. All right, maybe the guy is working 60 hours a week and he's averaging 150 grand a year, right? And so the simple solution is, you know, okay, Mr. Sales Rep, can you work less? And if you work less, can you afford to only make 100 grand a year? Is your wife's happiness enough based on your current skill set and the hours that you work? Is it important enough to make 50 grand less a year? Is that even possible for you? And, some days, family of five, you're right there, right? You're barely, not barely making it. That's silly. But in terms of our standard of living that you might have at your company, it's not good enough, right? And so that's the first question I'm going to ask is, can we adjust your output to accommodate the time that you spend with your family, right? And so we can go into all different ways to adjust this formula, but at the end of the day, there is an adjustment that needs to take place, right? As long as that's the end goal. If the sales rep says, my wife thinks I work too much, but she also likes designer handbags and to drive a nice vehicle, and the insurance on that is expensive and everything. Well, I'm going to leave it up to my sales rep to weigh the pros and cons. You know what I mean? And so that at the end of the day, this whole, and I'm getting too deep, right? I'm getting too detailed here, but at the end of the day, this whole conversation is scoped around what that salesperson's goal is, right? Did the goal change based on the reality of the position? And maybe we're 3 months in, maybe we're 6 months in, and they're realizing, oh, I'm never getting out of this with the current formula. Okay. So some other ways that he can accommodate this goal is to increase his skill rather than his output, right? And so my next question is, have you watched the training videos that we've set up for you? Have you watched the 2.0 and the 3.0? Are you in a book every week? Are you constantly studying? Are you taking your education beyond what's at this company? But at minimum, are you doing what's at this company? Because your education and your participation are going to result in a certain amount of production, right? And so again, the goal. What's the goal? Alignment, peace, contentment, right? Uh, and there's a certain dollar amount that's part of that formula for those things. I know me personally, I'm talking about me personally now. I know that if I bring in a minimum of 15K a month personally, that is probably my contentment amount, that my family is taken care of. My chickens are fed, my dogs are happy, my kids get what they want and they need for school, for extracurriculars. We don't need a whole lot, but that's because we were smart after, you know, a decade of a 20, 15 to 20 grand burn rate. I finally got it down to 9, you know? So there's so many ways to tweak this formula in a one-on-one conversation, and you have to kind of push and prod around it to find out what makes sense for them. Now, let's just assume that it's always going to be the same or more money, but less time. Okay, so then, yeah, we need to work on our skill. We need to work on our skill level. We need to increase our conversion rate. And then the next thing I'm looking at is, okay, where's your leads coming from? Where's your lead quality coming from? All right, let's just say they're in door to door. You're knocking low end neighborhoods where your lead quality is low. Oh, but I could talk to more people, completely understand. But the conversations you are having, the conversations you end up closing, result in a credit fail X amount of times. Again, we're going back into the formula. All right. Well, if we raise it to a middle class neighborhood, then that credit fail decreases. That amount of people I talk to decreases, unfortunately. But when I do close someone, the quality of that sale increases, and so on and so forth as we get into higher end neighborhoods. Are you setting up referral partnerships? The referral partners that sell your ideal customers, are you setting those up? Right. And so if you're in solar or something like that, are you partnering with mortgage brokers? Are you partnering with premium roofers? Are you partnering with high end services that can drop your name and refer you business? Electricians is another great one because they're already working on the electrical in the house. And they could ask a simple question at the end of the service visit or the install, whatever they're doing there. Hey, how much is your electric bill every month? Do you want to get rid of that? So all that being said, this formula, you all have it in your sales programs. It consists of a certain amount of prospecting activity. That prospecting activity may be targeted towards the end user, or it may be targeted towards referral partners, or it may be targeted towards an event or a social media prospecting activity. Those should all be documented. But there's one main one that if you just do this X amount of times, you're going to yield a certain result, right? And so, what is the plan to get to that goal? Is the question. And can we alter that plan to get to that goal? That's what every one on one should start with, right? And remember, it's the goal that they said they wanted, not the company quota. Quotas are bullshit. Quotas don't freaking matter because at the end of the day, the only person the quota should matter to is the sales manager, the regional, the VP, the owner. That's the only person that gives a damn about the quota, especially if it's tied to their bonuses, right? Or if it's tied to your profit or your bottom line. That's the only person that cares about the quota. It's not the individual rep. They're team players. Don't get me wrong. They'll be team players all day long, but they need to take care of their family first. Their quota is what matters to them, not yours, right? But more often than not, if you took your team right now and you got all of their personal goals and the numbers they had to do to reach them, more often than not, it exceeds your quota. And if it doesn't, what does that mean? You need more salespeople, or you need better leads, or you need to adjust your company formula to accommodate their targets, right? Now, that also means you have a minimum expectation, right? You have what you want for them. And if they don't want it for themselves, then maybe they don't belong at your company. They need to go reach those personal goals at another company that will accept what is below your minimum expectation for each individual rep. But you establish that early on, you have it scoped out, you've got the formula and the results in front of them when they decide to take on the position. Okay. All that being said, now we have our goal. Now we have our formula to reach our goal. Okay. Do we have a scope of work? You guys heard me talk about this a million times. Scope of work, income producing activities from most common and easiest to do all the way to the hardest one to do, right? You got the schedule. Are you following the schedule? The schedule is part of the formula, right? If I'm not working a certain amount of hours, I can't talk to a certain amount of prospects. That's going to result in a certain amount of conversations. That's going to result in a certain amount of sales. That's going to result in a certain amount of money in my bank account. That's going to result in me hitting my personal targets. It all goes together, and it is a beautiful symphony of numbers and formulas and calculations when it's done right. Okay, but the scope is required. It's part of that. All right. And so going back to minimum standards and understanding, so this is where the conversation gets real. Are you doing the required activity to produce the result to hit the goal that you said you wanted to hit? I'm going to say it again. Are you, Mr. Sales Rep, doing the required activity to hit the desired goal I'm sorry, to get the desired results that will allow you to hit your personal goals? Are you doing that required activity? Most of the time, whenever these people come to me with this question is how do I get this sales rep or how do I get this manager to do what I asked them to do? That's the answer. There's a formula in your company, whether you've identified it and put it out in front of everybody or not. There's a formula for success. The beautiful thing about it is it can be reverse engineered. That mountain can be reverse engineered according to that formula for their success, their personal success, because that's what they care about. Okay. Now, the minimum standards are the minimum success you'll allow at your company. This is a sale amount, a dollar amount, a um prospecting amount, an appointment amount. There's metrics that go with this minimum standard that you'll allow. There's a formula with that minimum standard that's that has to be hit every day. The beautiful thing about minimum standards is they're based on activity, not results. Okay. If we're going to terminate someone and they're putting in the required amount of activity for them to hit the minimum standards, but they're not hitting the minimum standards, then we've failed in our training and they failed in their absorption of that training, right? So we need to tweak things in their absorption and in our training to make them successful because they're putting in the activity. Man, I'll take a rep that puts in the activity all day over a rep that doesn't put in the activity but somehow pulls off the intended results, because those intended results are often tainted with quality issues. Those intended results are often tainted with exceptions, right? Those intended results, maybe even, I wouldn't call it tainted, but they may require talent. They may require connections and abilities that the average sales rep doesn't have, right? But the average sales rep can be made above average if they're shown the formula. But a talented and high ability sales rep cannot be convinced to do the minimum standards if they don't think they have to, if they think they're special. That's a line that y'all probably need to listen to over and over again. Because if you truly want scale in your sales program, you're going to need participation and education, P&E, the hidden metrics, right? Participation, showing up to the sales meeting on time, helping others if you are a top producer. These are very simple things that managers stop paying attention to. So in our one-on-one, we're going to go over the goal. We're going to go over the plan to get to the goal. We're going to go over the scope, make sure that all the activity is being hit, the schedule is being followed, the income producing activities are being executed, right? We're going to make sure that they're meeting the minimum standards. That's easy. They are, they aren't. And if they aren't, we're going to ask them why. I thought you wanted to hit this goal. Okay. If you don't meet the minimum standards, you're definitely not going to hit the goal, right? And so that's what the one-on-one is for. And then the commitment. We're going to wrap up that conversation with the commitment, right? And this isn't always a negative conversation. Sometimes it's an incredibly positive conversation. All right, let's just say they're hitting all their goals. They have all the things. They haven't gone through the sophomore slump yet, so they are thriving in their first few months in the company, right? So now what do we do with them? We're having a one-on-one that we prompted, not they prompted. So now what do we do with them? We charge them with a commitment to be the example. We charge them with commitment to lift others up around them, to pour into them, to show us that they are the future of this company. They are the future leaders in this company. So either it's a positive conversation like that, or it's a constructive conversation where we've broken apart the formula to find out what parts they're missing and why they're not hitting their goals. So at the end of this one-on-one conversation, we have to get the commitment from them to do one of those things, to either take the constructive criticism and apply it and execute, or take the challenge to be the leader, to be the example, and to pour into others and lift them up. Okay. And the last piece of this to understand as you're going through this conversation is hold the line. Hold the line. As you scale, as you grow, there will be people that come into your organization, even though you're doing, the wise higher stages that I always tell you guys about, even though you're putting in hoops for them to jump through, even though you're doing predictive index on the front end and you're matching them to their ideal trainer, even though you're doing all the things, they will still slip through, or things happen. Traumatic things happen. People change. And so if something happens like that and you realize that they're not holding the standard, they're not executing on the minimum standards, that it's not just a fluke, that it's not just a personal issue or something like that, that they've consistently underproduced, you've got to hold the line. And you've got to have a policy in place to hold that line. You have to have a trigger that says, hey, we need to talk to this person. We need to have a one-on-one, make sure their goals are still the same. Make sure they still understand the formula. Make sure what part of that formula are they not hitting so we can reverse engineer and get them to that goal. This is one of those episodes I would say, if you only listen to one episode, listen to this one. Because this one contains a lot of the core of Kodak, of the core of the issues I'm seeing out there, and of the core of the answer to that question. How do I get my sales rep to perform? How do I get my sales manager to perform? And the answer to that question is hold the line. Hold the line, understand their goal, which ultimately should be alignment, peace, and contentment, but understand their goal in order to achieve those things. Know the scope and the plan to get there. Hold them to the minimum standards and get their commitment to execute on all of the above. And you'll be in good shape. The last thing I want to point out is it sounds tactical. It sounds cold, I guess you could say, because it's all with plans and scopes and standards, right? But remember how you started. You started wanting to understand what they wanted. You didn't start saying, hey, I need you to hit this quota because the company said. You said, what do you want? How are you doing? How could you be doing better? Or how could you feel more peace, more alignment, more contentment? And then we're going to reverse engineer that. And because you're at this company, it's above the minimum standard. What the reverse engineering ends up being of your goal, it is above the minimum standard. That's all I got for you today, guys. Hold the line. Hold the line and let's get building. As always, if you enjoyed this episode, if you got something from it, if you took a note, I would ask that you only reciprocate with a rating or review, or just share this with one of your peers, one of your fellow business owners, one of your fellow sales managers. I appreciate you. Y'all have a wonderful week.